Hello and welcome to Autistic FM. My name is Haje, I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the metronome that keeps the beat jumping along. You can subscribe to Autistic FM wherever you get your podcasts, and it would be really awesome if you did. That's how we grow, that's how we thrive. Over on our website on autistic.fm, you can find episode transcripts and additional information. We also have discussion threads for each individual episode, a neurospicy discussion forum, and much more. And all of that is free. If you become a supporter for as little as $5 a month, you can get a sneak preview of all the topics we have coming up, and even submit questions to our guests. You can also add topics to our future topics wishlist, and you can get access to supporters-only discussion groups. We have a bunch of additional supporter treats coming up, so stay tuned. In this episode of the podcast, I'm joined by Rebecca Kaplan, a talented stand-up comedian based in New York, who brings her unique autistic perspectives to the comedy stage. Rebecca shares her journey from childhood experiences of being perceived as different to embracing her autism diagnosis during the COVID pandemic. Through comedy, she defies stereotypes and challenges the conventions of humor, offering a fresh voice in a field that often overlooks neurodivergent talent. Our conversation explores the intersection of autism and comedy, delving into the power of observational humor and the unique insights that Rebecca brings to the stage. We talk about the challenges of social interactions, networking, and maintaining mental health in a demanding field. Rebecca's work not only entertains, but also sparks critical discourse on societal issues and the need for greater understanding and inclusivity in comedy and beyond. Before we dive in, a quick trigger warning. This episode includes discussions about mental health and neurodivergence, online harassment, discrimination, and sensitive topics within comedy. Please take care of yourself and listen accordingly. With all of that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm joined by a wonderful guest who I'm really excited to talk about and talk with. Maybe we'll talk about you too, but mostly we'll talk with you. My wonderful guest, would you tell me your name and your pronouns, please?
Yeah, it's Rebecca Kaplan, and any pronouns are fine.
Wonderful. And where in the world are you?
I am based in New York City.
And how did you discover you might be neurospicy?
Oh, I got told pretty repeatedly throughout my childhood. And then during the pandemic, one of my friends who has an ADHD diagnosis told me, like, the official autism diagnosis, you could get the COVID vaccine earlier. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to try to figure out how to do that.
That is an unusual driver, but that's awesome. And so presumably you did end up with a diagnosis. Would you mind sharing what that is?
Autism spectrum disorder. I guess like they're calling it level 1 now. That's like the new.
Yeah. The reason why I was super psyched to talk with you is you have a very unusual thing you do, which is you're a stand-up comedian. And there's a couple of things that are wonderful about that. One thing is you are funny as hell, which I love. But also, there's often this kind of trope going around that autistic folks aren't funny or don't have a sense of humor. And clearly you're out there proving everybody wrong. What drew you to that as a way to spend your time?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the funny thing about like that particular stereotype is that I feel like anecdotally 50% of people doing stand-up comedy have some level of autism. But I've just always liked making people laugh. And I guess like what drew me specifically to stand up is getting that kind of immediate reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I started doing more like written stuff, and it's just like, you write something, people like maybe read it and then it goes away and it feels like a lot of wasted effort. Whereas like stand up, you get to like write something and then do it on stage repeatedly. I don't know. I feel like our society, most people would rather watch a video than like read something, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so in your world, do you do your stand-up comedy like in clubs, in person?
Yeah, I mean, knock on wood, I have been lucky enough to perform at comedy clubs, but I also do like a lot of like bar shows.
What drew you to comedy in the first place? Did people always find you funny? Did you find you funny? What is the thing that makes you joyous about comedy?
I think that maybe especially for people who are neurodivergent, you kind of tend to see things that quote unquote neurotypical people don't see. So for me, it's like hard to participate in conversations at like a normal level. So it's like, if you can kind of like getting laughter is like just kind of like an easier way to get people to respect. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I resonate with that very strongly. Like whenever I'm at a dinner party, I'm always like, I don't know when to speak. I don't know if I should interrupt. Sometimes I hear people have like a whole conversation and I'm like, I know exactly what the answer is to this conversation, but I can't get a word in edgewise. And then sometimes the only way I can be quick enough is by just making terrible puns.
Yeah.
I think like I couldn't do stand-up comedy to save my life, but I'm very quick with terrible, terrible dad jokes. And I feel like it's a way to participate, right? And I'm not always sure if people appreciate it, but it is so fascinating that you have chosen this as one of your things because, I mean, to a lot of autistic folks, standing on stage and being seen and performing is terrifying. Is that true for you as well? Or are you like, nah, I've got this?
I do genuinely really like storytelling and writing and making people laugh, but part of what got me into stand up early on is really crippling. I don't even know if anxiety is the right word because I don't know if I was anxious per se or if I just couldn't do it, but I really struggled with speaking in public. And when I say public, I mean literally any type of interaction with strangers, like ordering coffee at a cafe was like difficult for me. Like it was like that bad. Oh, if it was like driven by anxiety or just like lack of ability, but either way I was like, I need to get better at talking out loud, like period. And so trying kind of like forcing myself to do open mics, it was partially literally just a way to practice saying words out loud to strangers, and I found it very helpful. If I get nothing out of it other than learning how to talk without struggling so hard, this will have been worth it. And I do feel like that. If I don't make it in stand-up comedy, I feel like I've still like gotten way personal gains out of it.
Yeah. What does making it in stand-up comedy look like to you? Like, what's your dream?
I mean, I think people like generally mean being able to make some type of living off of it, or maybe further down the line becoming well known. A lot of people do make a living out of it without being well known.
Do you have a sense of what your goal is?
I'm just trying to enjoy it. For me, like enjoying it in the moment is more important than anything else because it's hard to predict the future. So few people make it to the point of becoming well known or making a living out of it. I'm not saying that I wouldn't to have either of those happen, but I think as long as I'm enjoying doing it in the moment, like to me, that's enough success.
It sounds like the most extreme version of exposure therapy. Like, hey, I don't like talking to people, so I'm going to stand in front of a room with a microphone with a spotlight in my face and go for it.
Yeah, honestly, like really helpful to me because it's really hard to go through life not able to like say words. And I still get a lot of people will be like, I still give off the vibe of like that people are like, oh, you seem uncomfortable right now, even when I'm like not. But like it was it was truly like 1,000 times worse before.
Yeah.
Have you tried any type of like exposure therapy stuff?
I mean, I was really scared of speaking in groups, speaking on stage. And then at some point, I think I just ran out of shits to give, honestly. There's two major things that happened. For a while there, I was like, how do I get, I kind of had a similar thought process as you. It's like, how do I get over this fear of strangers thing? And I did a very silly thing, which is I became a policeman. I was a cop for 4 years in London, which thinking about it now is like, that was a bad idea. Because it turns out, I don't know, at least a friendly stand-up comedy show, people are there to help you. When you run after somebody in the street, they really don't want to help you out with the conversation. And the other thing was later on, I became a journalist. And so I became very comfortable. I have a broadcast journalism degree. I got very comfortable speaking into microphones. And now I'm like on stage interviewing groups of people with an audience of thousands on a semi-regular basis. And to me, the big difference there is like, people are like, oh, how do you do that? It's like, look, it's not like I have a personal relationship with 1,000 people. It is me and the microphone and a void of humans, right? Sometimes they laugh, sometimes they make sounds, but most of the time you don't have to worry about that. Now, nobody ever heckles me, so I think that would be I don't have to do crowd work. So I don't know if that's true for you, but that sounds terrifying. But yeah, that kind of exposure therapy has been pretty intense.
Yeah, I do think that exposure therapy can be really helpful to just get over stuff by doing it and practicing it. I think in terms of crowd
Yeah.
work, it helps to achieve a base level of comfort on stage first, and then like that's kind of like a second. It helps that at open mics people almost never heckle you. Open mic etiquette is like very strongly against talking while someone else is on stage.
Yeah.
So you do
Yeah,
kind
for
of get to
sure.
practice without like that level of difficulty most of the time.
Where do you get your material from? Like, what inspires you?
It's mostly just like random stray thoughts that I have or stuff from my life. I really like the school of comedy style where you take a situation from life and then push it to its like absurdist limits. I don't know if you've read James Thurber or like that type of um
Yeah.
like yeah, I think he's probably best known these days for having written the story that The Secret Life of Walter Mitty is based on. But yeah, I really like I mean I don't know I know like I think you found my TikTok from that one clip of that I prefer it when men stare at my chest. uh,
I think, I mean, it's one of those things, right, where I've watched a whole bunch of your TikToks. I think your observational comedy is really funny. You are cutting, like zero shits given, cut through the bullshit, like full on. And I love that. And I think some of the funniest things in the world is where you can take a trope or something that people have a well worn neural pathway for and then play with it. I mean, that's why I love the writing of Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett. The sentence starts in one place, but you don't know where it's going to go because they play with language, right? And I feel like you do that in a really beautiful way too. Does this come from like conversations you have with people, or do you sit around like, oh, what if the situation went like X, for example?
it's like a mix of things. If you do stand-up comedy or really any type of writing or creative thing, I think it's like good practice to carry around a notebook with you and just jot down funny things or funny thoughts or conversations in the moment, so that you don't forget them. But yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I did grow up reading like all of those. Like, I love Douglas Adams, and I haven't read too much of Terry Pratchett, but I loved like Good Omens. I think that type of comedy. I do think that The Hitchhiker's Guide is widely popular, but I think it might have like a special. I think that maybe people on the spectrum are drawn to it because of like you were saying that the wordplay and the absurdity. Our world is absurd, and like maybe neurodivergent people are more likely to see that absurdity than
Yeah. Well, and I think the beautiful thing about that is like observational comedy is a very well trodden genre.
yeah.
But the fact that you observe things that nobody else does gives you an edge, right? It's like you see the silly and the silliest things and the absurdity and the absurd, and laying that on thick is, I think, objectively hilarious.
Yeah, and I think that even though there are so many people with autism who are doing stand up, I think that it's such a broad spectrum and everybody sees things in their own unique way that I think you're less likely to get to autistic people that write the same exact jokes. I don't know. Are there any other like autistic comedians that you like or
I mean,
follow?
Mitch Hedberg, obviously, and if as the listener you haven't heard this, basically he sits on stage with a guy who plays double bass and tells one-liners, one after the other, just observational comedy. None of it is strung together. It's not a show per se. He just sits there and tells one-liners. And I find that hilarious because it plays both with the format of what a stand-up show is, and he just sits, as far as I can tell, he used to just sit around and look at the world and go, the world is weird. And I'm just going to say what I see. And it is funny. And just delivered super dry and deadpan. And I think it's super sharp. Who are some of your favorite comics?
I really love Emo Phillips. He's also very like absurdist. Are you familiar with him?
No.
He was kind of like a big in the alt scene in like the 80s, 90s. All of his stuff is in character as this really odd person. And he'll tell these stories where you have no idea where it's going, and they just go on. They're kind of just really long stories that go on like unexpected turns. A lot of clever wordplay and stuff. There's like a lot of good comedy out there. But I guess like the internet has really like broadened up the amount of like people who are talking about autism in comedy. I know, like you mentioned, like Hitchhiker's Guy. Like, are there any other like, I don't know, comedy stuff that you are a fan of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a voracious reader. I read a lot of stuff. I was a journalist for a long time, and I like just playing with words. And so I love reading a lot of different writers with different styles and different forms of comedy and that kind of stuff. And I mean, Eddie Izzard is another old favorite of mine. Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry together do a lot of really absurd, weird language play stuff, but also just off the wall weird. And they fall kind of in a newer version of the old Monty Python, like completely bizarre. But I think in all of those things, the thing it has in common is that the funny part is based on taking one of your preconceptions and then turning it on its head. And I think that's what draws me to your stuff. That's what draws me to a lot of like I don't want to sit there and be able to guess the next 3 words out of your mouth. Like that's not interesting to me. I think part of it is just I have such strong pattern recognition. And I feel like that's how AI works too, right? When it writes, it's so boring because it's always the same phrases and all the language makes so much sense. And I'm like, well, life is too short. We get to have fun with these gifts we've been given.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because like some of my personal favorite bits that I've written, they're like too weird for regular audiences. So a lot of stuff that I've written that's way too absurd, and I'm just trying to find the balance of what's normal enough to get a good crowd reaction, enough that I really like it.
Can you give an example? Like what kind of thing?
Yeah, so one of them, I'm planning to post it on Monday. It's like just a joke. My friend was talking about this one guy, and she said, "I bet he's not a god in bed or anything." And I was like, I wouldn't want to date a god in bed, you know, especially not a Greek god. He'd probably try to turn you into a duck or something, right? Like, you think normal men take it hard when you turn them down? You try breaking up with a Greek god, and they're like, "Well, I hope you like having a cloaca." I mean, I have one of those too, but like on a duck, it's normal. It's too weird.
I love it.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, and I mean, yeah, the Greek gods will cut your head off, and then suddenly you'll have a Pegasus come out of your neck, right? And that's totally normal. It's like, yeah, that's not really. How do you put that on your Tinder profile? I'm not sure. That's hilarious. I love that. I remember when I was probably about 16 or so, me and a friend of mine, both super neurodivergent, and neither of us knew it. We spent all night drinking way too much Coca-Cola and writing a stand-up comedy routine about the spaghetti coming to life and us throwing it away because we felt too bad about it being alive, and then doing a little ashes to ashes, dust to dust ceremony for this poor spaghetti that had come to life and that we didn't want to eat. We didn't want to put it out of its misery, and so we threw it in the bin. And the two of us laughed so hard that we were like borderline weeing ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we performed it to a live audience the next day, and it was just tumbleweeds. And somehow we just found that hilarious too. So the two of us were inconsolably laughing on stage, and the entire audience thought we were absolutely insane. And to this day, I maintain it's one of the funniest things I've ever done. It's just nobody else thought it was funny.
I think there's great value in making yourself laugh. And
Right.
I think there's like a phenomenon also that the more broad your thing is, the more, maybe like the wider the audience will be, but the less each audience member will like resonate with it. Whereas like the more specific it is, maybe fewer people will like it, but like they'll like it a lot more. And yeah, I think it's important to keep that in mind, especially with stand-up, because it's a live art form and you're getting feedback from people. I think it's easier to lose track of what is funny to you versus writing something at home. You're like, in the early stages, you're your only audience, so it's like easier to find your voice and be true to it. I think there's like great value in doing stuff whether or not it gets a good crowd react. Like, I think the more you do, hopefully the more you find your voice of what you want.
I love the comedians, though, who go out on stage with a little notebook and they're doing material, and then at some point they look down and go, well, that didn't work. And it's like, to me, that is hilarious, right? They thought it might not. They're trying new material. They're seeing how the audience reacts. And I don't remember who it was. There's a stand-up comedian who's like, look, if you're a band, people always want to hear the old classics. If you're a stand-up comedian, they don't want to hear your old jokes because they've already laughed at them. And so they want to hear new stuff. But new stuff, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And do you remember who said that? I can't remember it.
No, but it's true.
Right. It doesn't matter. It's universally true. But yeah, they did a whole stand-up comedy routine about being a stand-up comic, which, I mean, that is hard to make that work for an audience who is not stand-up comedians, right? If you have an audience full of people who've been there, sure, I think you can do that.
Yeah.
I think one of the funniest thing I have heard pretty much ever, this guy who does this is his air traffic controller, who does a stand-up comedy routine about the French air traffic controllers going on strike. And just explaining it like that, you're like, that is not funny. But he does it so well, and it's so like deadpan and sarcastic. And I am just in hysterics whenever I listen back to it. It's like a 20-minute routine. And I'm like, how do you do that? Because nobody gives a crap about air traffic controllers, right? It's like this thing that doesn't really exist in people's lives. The only time you're aware that an air traffic controller even exists is if your plane doesn't take off. Like if everything goes to plan, you never even think of them. And that is one of the beautiful things of comedy. You get to talk about stuff that happens. Same thing with Hannah, what's his face? Gadsby? No.
Hannah Gadsby is a...
Yeah, who did that comedy routine essentially about sexual assault, as far as I can tell.
Right.
And it is cutting. It is brutal. It is also funny. But she's like, no, I'm not here to be funny. This is not a joke. And a comedian that allows you to sit there and sweat and be uncomfortable and doesn't give you the release of a laugh at the end, that is powerful shit. And again, it plays with the preconception of what comedy is. And I have so much respect for things like that.
I know a lot of people, especially in New York City, kind of look down on this. The term for it is clapter, but it's more like meant for people to clap at it than it is something funny that you would laugh at. And a lot of people look down on it and they're like, people are just here to laugh and that's what comedy is. And I think that's limiting in a big way.
Well, I think it's like the Oscars, right? People go to the movie to have escape from reality. They're like, yeah, give me a film with lots of explosions or make me laugh. But the stuff that wins the Oscars is the stuff that changes the world, right? It's like, hey, we take this art form and we use it as like the Barbie movie is a great example. It's a funny film. But if you walk away from that and you're not moved about how the patriarchy has a grip on the country and on our souls and how deep that runs and how some of the stuff you accidentally laugh at and then you think about it for 3 seconds, you're like, oh, wait, that wasn't funny, kind of thing, right? But I think that's true in every art form, right? There is bubblegum pop, which is like just vapid, dancey. It can be fun, but it's vapid and dancey. And then you have music that really makes you feel and think. And then you have the very rare crossover.
Right.
The ones that go, hey, this is good, like enjoyable art. But if you look just behind the veneer, it's a whole thing. Do you feel like that is something you have thought about or something you do consciously? Do you want to make change happen in the world?
It's an interesting question because when you're doing a set at a comedy club, I think especially like at the level that I'm at right now, I care more about pleasing the booker of the comedy club so that they'll book me again and I can like succeed, like succeed up that like rung. I feel like I'm playing two ways depending on what the show is and what the stakes are. But yeah, I have written a lot of stuff where this is not funny as much as I think it is like a good point that people need to hear. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't put a lot of that stuff out there online because I think like online is like even like yet another animal where I don't want people to fucking like I posted a clip like a week and a half ago that made a lot of men's rights activists really mad, and people are like literally like sending me death threats and like grape threats. I'm like the grape emoji, if you can figure out what they meant. I guess it's like 3 different audiences in a way. Comedy club bookers, bar show people, and then the internet is like a whole nother. I don't know if that makes sense.
I have been on the receiving end of the alt-right a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it is incredibly unpleasant. There's a bunch of idiots stuck in their bedrooms who have nothing better to do than to bully people. I have a lot of bullying trauma. It's a very specific thing that I don't love. But I also am autistic enough that I have an incredibly strong sense of justice, and I will open my mouth. I've been fired from jobs for opening my mouth. And part of me is like, you go, girl, like, make people angry. And at the same time, if that crosses over into your sense of safety and well-being and mental health, then that's a really hard place to be, you know?
Yeah, if I have a bit that I feel strongly enough about that I'm willing to risk it for it, I guess I would post that. But yeah, in general, haven't posted my more political stuff. You're kind of making me want to now.
I mean, if that's the only thing that comes out of this podcast, I'm going to consider it a success. Look, you do you, and don't let me tell you what to do. But I think there's a really interesting thing here where there's plenty of funny people out there. There's not enough people who are funny, but are also willing to kick up. You refer to the video that actually TikTok served to me, how I found you. I don't want to steal the punchline. Would you summarize what that piece was?
Sure. It's like,
I am autistic, and I do feel like as an autistic woman, I tend to attract a lot of creeps. Because I actually prefer it when men stare at my chest when they talk to me. I meet a nice, respectful guy, and I'm like, hey, eyes down here, buddy.
It makes so much sense because eye contact is so fantastically uncomfortable, right? And that's the joke. And even in that joke, you're kind of making a political statement, right? It's like the reason it is funny is that you're playing with the trope of eye contact, but also of like where you're staring, what the male gaze is. And for me, that landed as a commentary on essentially on feminism, right? Like if your choices are between being respected for not wanting eye contact and being respected for people not staring at your boobs all the time, like it's a lose-lose, right? But I think the absurdity of that is funny, but pausing for half a second and thinking about, ooh, that's fucking dark, right?
I think that for most people, I think that like when you find your voice in stand-up, it's really hard to avoid making political statements in the broadest sense of the word politics. Like if you're truly never making any statements that seem political, then it's like you almost have no sense of you. I think that's true broadly of even the most absurd, unless you're going so absurd that like it has almost no bearing on reality, which is its own thing. I guess what I was talking about, like the stuff that I've written and haven't posted, or like maybe wouldn't feel comfortable performing at a comedy club. I read like this book about stand-up comedy that made an observation that I think is really true, and I try to keep in mind, which is that sometimes if there's this topic that you're genuinely angry about, you almost can't be funny about it. If there's like a point where you're too angry to make a funny comment on it, and I have written a lot of stuff like that where I'm like, this isn't a joke. I'm just angry and I want people to pay attention to this. I had one line I was doing maybe 5 years ago where I just said, men in South Korea, like this is like it's a really big problem that like men will hide cameras in public restrooms to get videos of women urinating, and they could hire a woman to do it, but part of what they want is to know that the woman didn't know they were being recorded. And I said, like, that's not a joke, that's just a terrible fact. And I don't know, it was getting laughter a decent amount of the time, but it's like, I guess it's like that type of thing where it's not a joke, it's just like you're just saying something.
I hear that. For a while, I had some friends, one who was a stand-up comedian, and a few others who were just generally funny people, and we would sit in a pub and we'd play a game called The Wrongest Thing, which was, what is the wrongest thing you can say at something?
Right.
And in a situation like that, like this is the setup for the joke, and then go around the table. Like, what is the most outrageous, insane, craziest, like, where could this story go? And I don't know why I haven't done that in a long time. Maybe because it made everybody around us incredibly uncomfortable. But I love that kind of thing. We're like, let's give ourselves permission to, like, what's the word? Workshopping the craziest, funniest, weirdest, and a lot of the time it does not work because you push the boundaries as far as you possibly can. But I think there's learning in that, right? Because even sitting with, like, I said the thing that was really far outside of the boundary. Why was that outside the boundary? Why was that not funny? And the people who are closest to me give me a lot of grace because I don't have a lot of filters and I don't have a lot of whatever. And there was the wildfires that were happening in South California recently, and my girlfriend's parents live in Pasadena, which is like right where the fires were. And I'm currently thinking about moving house, and I had this conversation with someone, and they were like, "Where are you thinking of moving?" And I was like, "Well, Pasadena's really hot right now."
Yeah.
And just held that silence, and they were clearly super uncomfortable. I was like, "It was a joke," and they were like, "Too soon." I was like, "Yes," and in the context of this conversation, that was funny. They didn't agree, and that's where my autistic ass sometimes has to go, okay, people died, people lost their homes, that is not funny. And this is where I'm scared of my own filters, where I don't know what isn't funny. And if you do that in front of a live audience, maybe you get somebody say, "Oh God, you can't say that," and you get a laughter out of that. But in a small group of people, that doesn't work, right?
I think that when you're among friends, you need to trust that the people that you're with know that you're not coming from a bad place. That even if they didn't like that you said that, they know that you aren't like seriously wishing harm on people or like taking glee in harm.
Right.
You're just taking something less seriously than they are, or being open to joking about it. But yeah, if you're doing something in a public venue, even if it's just casual conversation, if you're among people that you don't know very well, I think it's good practice to take special care around serious issues. I think learning what and when to say that type of thing is a skill that you can hone over time, even if you weren't born with that ability, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like there's a group of people where you've earned your benefit of the doubt.
Totally.
And there's groups of people where you haven't or haven't yet. And it's actually interesting. Sometimes when I say something particularly outrageous around those people, sometimes they rally around me and think it is hilarious, but for the wrong reason. Where I'm like, oh, and in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that joke was borderline racist. And the fact that they thought it was hilarious is actually problematic. Like, this is not okay.
Right.
Or that joke was slightly on the sexist side, and I actually regret telling that joke. But the fact that they thought that was hilarious, oh, I don't like those people anymore, right? And that's this really weird moment where I'm like, oh, I got to know something about you that I maybe rather didn't know, kind of thing.
I think, though, that just because somebody laughs at a joke that is problematic doesn't necessarily mean that that person agrees with the content of it. Because socially, laughter can be a sign that you agree with something, but laughter also comes from like taboo. Just saying something taboo can make people laugh. They might have been laughing like, wow, he just said something racist and that wasn't okay, and I don't know what to do, so I'm gonna like laugh. It's not like a conscious thought process, but I think that's kind of I mean, I have like, you know, jokes that I like used to do that I was like, at the time even I was like, I don't believe in this, but I like just said it because like, you know, I think like when you start out in comedy, you're just like anything to get a laugh. I look back on some of those stuff and I'm like, wow, I didn't mean it in a sexist way. It was just like a thing where I said this guy invited me back to his place and for dinner, and there was this jar of curry paste that neither one of us could open, and that's a deal breaker because you know what they say, if you don't have good jar opening hands, you don't have good choking hands. And and you know, I've like started saying like, you know, I need someone who can protect me. Is that not what you thought I meant? I don't know. Right, because like I don't want to make fun of like, you know, nobody should be getting choked during set, even if you're like.
I mean, there are people who are into that and have that as a kink, but I think in order to be telling that as a joke, you have to have that set up earlier in your set, I think.
Yeah. The reason that I'm like would be uncomfortable, like, you know, making like the joke of like, oh, I like to be choked is, first of all, I don't. And second, I think that like it is a serious problem where a lot of men see pornography and will choke women without asking if that's okay. I don't want to perpetuate the thing of, oh, women like being choked and it's okay to choke.
No, but I think that is a really important piece. It's like what you say in which context, and even like, like I think some of the best comics I know, their old stuff did not age well. Like some of Eddie Murphy's old stuff, some of Dave Chappelle's old stuff. There's a lot of comedy out there. Like if you look at comedies from the 90s where you're like, oh, yikes. This stuff is not only not funny, but this would have set back this issue. by a significant amount of time, by making light of something. I do firmly believe that there are ways of being funny about anything, but context and nuance all the way down.
Yeah, like I think Joan Rivers is like maybe a good example of that type of thing, where you know that she wasn't coming from a bad place, but a lot of her stuff like wouldn't fly by today's standards.
And then sometimes I get incredibly positively surprised when I see old sitcoms where every joke is wholesome. It's legitimately still funny. They went close to the line, but they didn't step over it.
Right.
And I'm like, oh yeah. And some of the old stuff just isn't watchable because it's like, oh, I don't think it's cancel culture. I think it's writers who knew where the boundaries were and how to be funny about difficult topics without going too far, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of that and also our social values change over time. And then also as individual people mature with age and experience, you don't find the same things as enjoyable as you used to.
Yeah, the whole shock comedy thing was funny when I was 13, and now it's like, come on, dude, grow up.
Right. I think Neil Gaiman is one example. When I was in middle school and high school, I really enjoyed Neil Gaiman's work. But looking back, there's books of his that I haven't read since then, where when I was like 14, I kind of glossed over this like really gross and weird sex scene. But like now looking back,
right,
and
especially with the context we have today.
Yeah. I think even without that context, like I don't know if I would have. I think that I would have been more disturbed today reading those same scenes, because I don't know, I guess it's like when you're a kid you're like, oh, this is like dark but it doesn't apply to me in the same way, or this is happening to these other weird characters. And then the more mature you get, you're like, oh, like this is a thing that happens regularly in the real world. The more horrible stories you hear, the less appetite, like at least I think I have, for reading about it in fiction. And I think the same kind of applies to comedy. Sorry.
I think where I stumble is that people who are contemporaneous with Neil Gaiman back then, like, and way before, like Anne Rice writes some steamy ass shit, right? But somehow manages, because it's fantasy, because it's about vampires, because it's gothic, because whatever it is, it's steamy as hell, but it doesn't step into that, ooh, this is problematic, or ooh, I wish I kind of didn't know that existed space.
Right.
And I think that means that it isn't just the voice of the time, it's also, no, it is possible to write hot stuff that doesn't cross into consent problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a combination of standards of the times, maybe writing skill, and then maybe the point of view of the individual person who's writing it. I don't know, were there any sitcoms in mind that you were thinking of that aged poorly?
See, that's what I was thinking about. Now I can't think of a single specific example. And it's not even the main storylines that I trip over. It's like by and large, Star Trek is super wholesome, right? That is one example. There's some funny stuff in there, very wholesome. And then there are other shows, like some Saved by the Bell stuff and some Baywatch stuff and that kind of generation of television, mid-90s-ish, where a lot of the jokes, I'm like, oh, this is neither funny nor okay, right? And then there are other shows from the same kind of era that somehow sidestepped all of that. And it's like, it's the same era, it's the same culture, it's the same context. In some cases, it's even the same writers. But there's somebody on the writing team that's going, hey, no, we don't do that. And I bet you in the writing room, all the crazy, dark, disturbing shit came up. But at some point, somebody had a voice and said, not for this show. This is not what we're doing here. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. I was going to say there's more skill in writing a good story or a good joke that doesn't shock, because I think shock value itself can be cheap. I also don't want to negate the value of a well-crafted shock joke or shock scene. Maybe it's that like cheap shock value stuff ages poorly.
Yeah, but I think it's also about directionality, right? I think a lot of the time when those jokes fall flat, it's when a person who has, and maybe we're more aware of that now, but a person who has intrinsic power differentials by virtue of age, race, gender, etc., that then becomes the butt of a joke, that's where I end up cringing. Because I'm like, oh, even then, this is toxic masculinity, or this is something that we today have a name for. And back then just felt a little cringe and people kind of did the nervous laugh thing. But you can flip those jokes on their head. If you tell exactly the same joke about a position of a person in position of power, it would be hilarious because A, the joke is the same, but now it's funnier because it's like backwards. I can't remember which show it was in, but there's these two people talking about some sort of a sexy thing they're about to do. And they pan down to the bedside table and there's this ball gag, right? And this big kind of burly dude is standing there, picks up the ball gag and goes, well, maybe next time you can wear the ball gag. And that is funny because you immediately assume it's the other way around, right? And so they turn it on its head and you have this whole thing and it's like, oh, and he's asking.
Right.
He's asking for consent. And I'm like, there's so many little things in there that are really, really funny. And you're still playing with the same tropes, but in that circumstance, that joke is just much funnier.
Was it Deadpool?
It may have been Deadpool. It sounds like it. Yeah, Deadpool does all of those kinds of things really, really well. Or maybe it was about the strap-on. Maybe next time you wear the strap-on. Clearly, I'm excited about comedy, but I don't know enough about it to really hold my own in this conversation. But I love it. It makes me very happy.
Yeah, I think like maybe part of something that's true in the context of all of this is that I think that there's maybe more value in understanding that you could say a certain thing and get a laugh out of it, but being willing to walk away from it if it doesn't align with your values, or if you know that it's a cheap laugh that doesn't align with your values. And I think like that maybe comes with like maturity and like honing your voice and all of that stuff.
Well, and I think, I mean, not to make this super political, but I think there's a level of intellectual honesty and being willing to be honorable and gentlemanly or whatever. And I think that is eroding as we speak, right? The willingness to play by the rules or to be honorable. And I think that kind of thing will start showing up in comedy. And there will be some comedians who take that as an invitation to push the boundaries in directions that are edgy or not politically correct or whatever you want to call it. And other comedians will go, actually, no, thank you very much. This is like, it wasn't funny then, it isn't funny now, and I don't want to be part of it.
Right.
How do you find your filters? Like, if you come up with a joke where you're like, oh, I don't know if that's okay or not. Do you run it past someone? Do you just tell it on stage and see what happens? Like, what's your process?
If I write something where I'm like, I don't think this is coming from a bad place personally, but I think it might make audiences uncomfortable, or like there's any chance that it could be read as about something race, or where I'm like, I do usually run it by at least a few people before I'll even try it at an open mic. Because in theory, open mics would be a safe space where you could try saying a thing and get the reaction and not have people hate you. But in reality, people aren't going to forget that you said that. I don't know, God forbid somebody like report. I just wouldn't say anything at an open mic. You're still in public in an open mic, and I wouldn't say something there that wouldn't be okay if somebody recorded me secretly and posted it online. If something passes like the test of like I've run it by a few people and they thought it was okay, I'd try it at several open mics and then try it at like lower stakes shows. I have a few things where I think it's funny and I don't think it's coming from a bad place, and it makes people laugh sometimes, but if it makes too many people uncomfortable, I think I just have a lot of material and I'm constantly writing, and it's not worth it to keep trying to hone those particular jokes, or like, you know, I've like just set them aside for now, and I'm like, maybe I'll come back to that in like a year, or maybe if not, that's okay too.
So who are the people you trust to give you feedback? Like, oh no, Rebecca, that was too far, or yeah, that's fucking funny, try that on stage.
I would usually run it by my most socially aware friends.
Right.
You know,
your pet neurotypicals.
or like not even, I guess social justice like aware, you know, because I like not all quote unquote like social justice warriors are neurotypical. I think people who are like really clued into that scene, I would run it by them. And yeah, and maybe some like neurotypical people as well. But it gets hard to predict like that type of thing, because I think that your friend's judgment of whether you're coming from a good place is not necessarily the same as a stranger audience member who doesn't know or trust you.
And then you have, you know, 6 men's rights activists in the room who will not give you any benefit of the doubt. You
totally.
know?
Yeah, and I think like maybe like the more well-known you get in any art form, really, like the more out there you can go without losing whatever, because people like the more people know and trust you, the more forgiving they generally are. Or maybe it's not that they're like less forgiving, but the things that people wouldn't forgive the wider the audience you have, the more people saw that you did that. And then what I mean is, like, if I, as an unknown person, make a joke at an open mic that if people think is racist, then maybe 10 people saw it, and then it's just in those 10 people's heads, versus if I'm Dave Chappelle and I make a joke like that, 1,000 people saw it, and they're all going to tell somebody, I saw Dave Chappelle say this, and then it's like really...
Right. Well, to be fair, it's going to take a lot for him to get cancelled at this point, I think. But because he says a lot of completely outrageous shit, where I'm like, oh, I don't actually super enjoy his comedy for that reason, where I'm like, oh, I don't like this, and I don't want to spend the bandwidth to figure out even why.
I guess that's what a good example of what I meant, whereas like what he says is like super public, so it's not forgiven, but it's not forgiven and not forgotten, but he also has such a big audience that he can find enough people that still like it and forgive him and listen to it, that it's not affecting him.
Yeah.
And he obviously
well, I think there's been
give a shit. Like,
right. Like, yeah, he's far beyond that. The other one that springs to mind was Aziz Ansari's comedy special, where he's basically owning up to some pretty grim shit he did, and starts out with a genuine apology. And by the end of the show, he's cracking jokes. He's telling jokes at his own cost. And I think that takes real finesse, right? He's not kicking down. He's not making fun of the situation, but he is making fun of himself. And I think that takes enormous balls. And I think that is a really good example of how comedy can help disarm and shed some light on. And like, do I wish he hadn't been a major prick? Absolutely. Do I think it's very brave to stand on a stage and own at least most of it? I've heard some commentary that maybe there was some more stuff or that it wasn't great. But standing on the stage in front of thousands of people and doing a Netflix special and owning up to what you did, apologizing, and then making fun of yourself, I genuinely think that comedy special attracted the audience from people who really needed to see that.
Yeah. I agree. First of all, I will also say that what Aziz Ansari did, well, at least what he's been publicly accused to and he admitted of, is like not as bad. There are other people that committed crimes where I'm like, okay, that, like, I don't want to say that anything is ever unforgivable, but let's say Neil Gaiman, I would need a much higher level of threshold of remorse from what Neil Gaiman did than Aziz Ansari did something that isn't okay. But I mean, like the being too pushy on a date and not taking no for an answer, that's not okay. But that's such a common thing that practically every man that has gone on a date with a woman has done something like that.
And I think it's something powerful to seeing somebody you look up to on stage saying, hey, I did that thing and that wasn't okay.
Right.
I mean, in one way, that is a way you can change the world, right?
Right. He's being part of a positive conversation around change in a way that, like, yeah, I think takes bravery. I feel like we've gotten on like a wild tangent from what...
I mean, it's all about comedy in one way or the other,
That's
right?
True. Did you have like more things that you wanted to get to about like autism and comedy specifically, or?
I mean, I had so many questions, and of course I didn't write any of them down. Well, I did. They're on the list over there somewhere. I am curious. I think we actually covered most of it. Are there ways that you feel that you being autistic is particularly helpful in being a comedian?
That's a good question. Obviously, there are things that come to mind where it's like not an asset. I think that obviously networking and maintaining social relationships is like a really important part of many things, but also stand-up comedy, and I'm like, struggle with that. But I guess for like just performing, I get told frequently that my viewpoint and style of delivering jokes is unique, and it's strange because people are like, oh, you're so unique, and I'm like, I think I just have autism. They're like, oh, it's so interesting how you stumble and stutter a lot and don't make eye contact with the audience and seem really awkward and nervous. And I'm like, I'm definitely not doing that. I'm
not acting.
Yeah, I'm actually trying my very best to not seem like that, but whatever works. And like, yeah, I think like that's if that's like people's takeaway from watching me perform, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I love that. I think we kind of talked about the main, like everything is weird and your observation and your pattern matching and all that kind of stuff. One thing I specifically wanted to ask you about is that a lot of autistic folks really struggle with rejection sensitive dysphoria. And I imagine standing on a stage and not getting a laugh can feel like rejection, right? Is that true for you? Is that something that you have a sense is particularly hard to receive?
I guess I've like been submitting to stuff my whole life because like I was doing writing, regular prose writing before this, and I have taken it really to heart that when you're pursuing something, anything really, maybe especially creative stuff, because there's so many fewer opportunities compared to the amount of competition there is, but that you just have to accept it and move on and bundle it. Like if you have a manuscript, like they say, like give it 100 rejections before you give up. I guess like from that sense, I have been more determined to succeed. I'm not saying that I'm not sensitive to rejection. Obviously, it's never fun getting rejected from something, but maybe it's just like that, again, like you were saying, like exposure therapy. I don't mean this in a conceited way. When I started doing open mics, I didn't bomb very often, or like I got laughs like right away. They might have been coming from just how strange I was more than like that it was funny, but yeah, by the time I had my first like real bomb, I already was like pretty deep into wanting to do it. Yeah, maybe I would have had a different experience if that. Or the other thing is in New York City open mics, a lot of times like people just like don't laugh at anything. It was a while before I had a bomb where I was like, this was me doing badly and not just that like literally no one was paying attention to me because no one's paying attention to anything. And again, I do think they were just laughing because I was doing strange things and whatever, more so than that I had like a perfectly crafted stand-up comedy routine. But yeah, I mean, I think if there are people listening that want to try stand-up and are like just super afraid of that sense of being rejected, I think that I would tell them that an open mic is actually a great place to practice gaining the ability to face rejection. Unless you say something that's like unforgivably racist or sexist or any of the other things, unless you say something that's like that level of like whatever, then there's truly like no stakes to it. Like you're just practicing saying stuff, and people, there's an understanding that like it's all new stuff and that maybe like it won't get a laugh and like it's fine and you move on. It's a safe space to fail. Unless you say something that's like really racist, that's forever. That's you. Don't do that.
You're just iced out forever. Yeah. I haven't done a lot of stand-up comedy. I think I've done 2 shows. And I remember in the first one, I was so nervous. And I hadn't rehearsed this, but I walked out and was like, I'm so scared everybody's going to laugh at me. But that's the point. And so if nobody laughs at me, that's a win. And then they laughed. And I was like, well, I can't lose now. Like I've kind of set myself up.
Right.
And the rest of the comedy routine, I bumbled my way through. But I don't know. It felt like, oh yeah, like resetting the context for what is about to happen in my mind was incredibly helpful.
Totally.
And I think if I'd rehearsed that as a line before I walked out on stage, it wouldn't have come out genuine. But I think I was just like, I walked out and was terrified. I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to address the terror because otherwise.
No, I think that's very true. And like, yeah, like just getting up there is also, that's like the coup.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I promised all my guests to keep it to under an hour, and I just looked at the clock and I failed. So I am sorry about that. I have 2 questions that I love to end on with my guests. Sure. And the first one is, what do you wish people knew about autism?
Yeah, that's a good question. That it's like a very broad spectrum, and that I think there's like a lot of people who are like, oh, like you don't look autistic, or like you're not acting, you know, whatever, or even like just stuff where they're not fully aware of what all of like the spectrum of the different ability levels are. I guess like it would be nice if there was like more nuanced understanding of it. I really struggle with recognizing people's faces. And I think like a lot of people like interpret that as like me being rude or that I don't care about them. I think that the understanding that many people have about autism is shallow and not deep.
Right.
I don't know if that's like a very like rambly answer, but like, yeah.
No, I think that makes so much sense. And face blindness is a real thing, right? And I think in the case of autistic people, it's like, no. If I didn't like you, you would know it because I'd fucking tell you. Like, I just didn't recognize you kind of thing. And my final question is, can you tell me of a time where you were seen and loved in exactly the right way for you?
Wow. What a deep... I don't know. I guess my... You know, I think my friends mostly accept me for who I am. My, you know, friends that I like and don't dislike, because I wouldn't be friends with somebody that I didn't like. But yeah, like oh man, I don't know if I can think of like a specific example off the top of my head, but like yeah, I think I have a lot of friends that accept my quirks, as it were.
I think that's the same answer for me, to be honest. The people who are willing to look past my dumb jokes and missing things and being overwhelmed all the time, who still say, hey, you're a good person. It takes a little bit of work on their behalf, right? And so people are willing to do a little bit of work to see me. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, right?
Yeah, I mean, it probably helps that like most of my friends are neurodivergent in some way themselves. So it's like we each are simultaneously forgiving and working with our quirks and whatever.
Yeah, I love that. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I thought this was a wonderfully divergent but wonderfully wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the podcast. You can find us on TikTok under Autistic FM, on Instagram at autistic_FM, and on the web at autistic.fm. On the website, you can subscribe for free, join in the discussions about each episode, and suggest future guests. You can also become a supporter for as little as $5 a month. As a supporter, you can suggest topics for the podcast and submit questions for our guests. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Haje Kamps. And here's a weird fact that I love. The Amazon River is more than 4,000 miles long, but it doesn't have a single bridge crossing it. It turns out there's just not a lot of population centers, not that many roads, and boats and ferries work just fine, so nobody bothered. But yeah, that's 4,000 miles of no bridges. Until next time, take care.